They say the city never sleeps. They're lying. It just holds its breath, a vast concrete lung waiting for the next gasp of violence, the next whispered secret to ripple through its veins. Tonight, the air itself felt heavy, thick with the scent of rain and desperation, a familiar perfume to those who lived on its fringes. The flickering neon sign of the Crimson Spoon cast a sickly red glow on the wet pavement, a beacon for the lost, the hungry, and the damned. Inside, the clatter of cheap cutlery and the low hum of conversation did little to mask the tension that clung to the air like a shroud. Aiyah Johnson moved through it all with the practiced grace of a dancer navigating a minefield. Her uniform, a crisp white shirt and black apron, was spotless despite the endless parade of spilled coffee and forgotten crumbs. Her skin, the colour of rich earth, seemed to absorb the dim light, making her eyes, dark and knowing, stand out like polished obsidian. She was 28, but the weight of her life, the crushing medical bills for her younger sister, the relentless eviction notices, the ghost of a past she fought daily to outrun, had etched lines of premature wisdom around them. She carried a tray laden with dirty dishes, each clink a tiny echo of the crumbling walls of her own existence. Then the bell above the door chimed, a discordant note in the diner's symphony of despair. A hush fell, unnatural and immediate. Every head turned. In walked a man who seemed to drag the very shadows in with him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit that whispered of European tailoring and fortunes amassed in places best left unexamined. His hair was dark, slicked back, and his eyes, when they swept across the room, were the colour of a winter storm, steel grey, cold, and utterly devoid of warmth. This was not a man who visited diners like the Crimson Spoon for its greasy comfort food. This was a man who owned the night, who commanded respect, and who, Aiyah knew instinctively, brought trouble like a moth to a flame. He was Alessio Volkov. The name itself was a whisper of power, a shadow in the city's underbelly. He moved with a predatory stillness, his gaze lingering for a fraction too long on Aiyah as she paused, tray held aloft, a deer caught in headlights. He settled into a booth by the window, a corner table that offered him a panoramic view of the room and an unsettling sense of command. Two men, built like brick walls, positioned themselves at the entrance, their eyes scanning the room with chilling efficiency. The air crackled. The city wasn't sleeping, it was holding its breath, waiting for Alessio Volkov's next move. And Aiyah, caught in his orbit, felt a sudden, terrifying premonition that her life, already teetering on the brink, was about to be irrevocably altered. "Can I get you something, sir?" Aiyah asked, her voice steady, a testament to years of suppressing fear in the face of intimidation. Her hand, however, trembled slightly as she placed a menu before him. She met his gaze, refusing to flinch, a silent defiance in her dark eyes. She had faced worse than a man in an expensive suit, even one who radiated such palpable danger. She had faced hunger, sickness, and the cold indifference of a system designed to crush people like her. Alessio Volkov leaned back, his eyes narrowing. He didn't pick up the menu. Instead, he spoke, his voice a low rumble, laced with an accent Aiyah couldn't quite place, a blend of harsh consonants and rolling vowels, distinctly foreign, utterly alien in the familiar din of the diner. He rattled off a string of words, long and complex, a language she had never heard before, but which, by the amused glint in his storm-grey eyes, was clearly intended to be unintelligible. His lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, a challenge, a test. It was a language designed not to communicate, but to assert dominance, to embarrass, to remind her of her place. The other patrons, slowly resuming their conversations, glanced over, a ripple of curiosity and apprehension spreading through the room. They knew who Alessio Volkov was, or at least they knew his reputation. They watched, waiting for Aiyah to stumble, to blush, to apologize for her ignorance. They expected her to be humiliated. But Aiyah didn't stumble, she didn't blush. The faint tremor in her hand stilled. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a dangerous glint entering her dark eyes. She looked at Alessio Volkov, not with fear, but with a sudden, unexpected spark of something akin to recognition. Then she responded. Her voice, when it came, was soft, melodic, but clear enough to cut through the diner's ambient noise. She spoke in the same foreign tongue, each word perfectly articulated, each syllable imbued with a quiet dignity. Her response was not an apology, but a fluid, confident question, a direct and intelligent query about his preferred order, phrased with an impeccable command of the language. She even added a polite, almost imperious flourish at the end, a subtle tilt of her head that dared him to underestimate her again. The smirk vanished from Alessio Volkov's face. His storm-grey eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock, then a slow dawning of something else, intrigue perhaps, or a grudging respect. The patrons, those who understood the implications of her response, gasped. The two bodyguards at the door, impassive until now, exchanged a quick, surprised glance. Aiyah merely stood there, holding his gaze, the faint smile still playing on her lips. The air in the diner had shifted, no longer thick with tension, but now charged with a different kind of energy, an electric current of disbelief and burgeoning fascination. Alessio Volkov, the man who commanded the shadows, had been met not with subservience, but with an unexpected challenge, a quiet power that resonated deep within the heart of the Crimson Spoon. He had ordered in a foreign language to embarrass her. He was shocked at her response, and in that moment, Aiyah Johnson knew, with a chilling certainty, that her life, already a tightrope walk over an abyss, had just taken a dizzying, irreversible turn. But to understand the weight of that moment, the quiet strength behind Aiyah's defiance, one must look back, peel away the layers of the present crisis, and delve into the crucible that forged her spirit. They say the past is a foreign country. For Aiyah, it was a battleground, a landscape scarred by loss and resilience. 5 years before, the city had been a different beast, or perhaps Aiyah had simply been a different person, less hardened, more naive. Her sister Maya, then a vibrant, curious 12-year-old with a laugh that could chase away shadows, had been her world. Maya's asthma, a constant insidious presence, had always been a concern, but it was manageable, a shadow that could be kept at bay with inhalers and careful monitoring. Until the night, the shadows swallowed them whole. It was a Tuesday, a night like any other. Aiyah had been working her shift at a different diner then, a greasy spoon on the other side of town, scraping together tips to cover rent and Maya's ever-increasing medical co-pays. The call came at 2 a.m., a frantic, breathless whisper from their elderly neighbour, Mrs. Henderson, a woman whose kindness was as boundless as her wrinkles. Maya, an attack, worse than usual. The ambulance was on its way, but time, that cruel master, was already slipping through their fingers. Aiyah remembered the sprint through the rain-slicked streets, the frantic pounding of her heart echoing the frantic rhythm of her footsteps. The wail of the sirens, a desolate cry in the deserted city, seemed to mock her urgency. When she arrived, the flashing blue and red lights painted their cramped apartment building in an apocalyptic glow. Maya, small and fragile, was being loaded into the ambulance, her chest heaving, her eyes wide with terror. "She needs the new medication, Aiyah," the paramedic had said, his voice grim. "The one that costs a fortune. Her lungs they're not responding to the usual treatment." That fortune. It was a sum that might as well have been a king's ransom. $3,000. $3,000 for a chance at breath, for a chance at life. Aiyah had felt the world tilt on its axis. She had nothing. Her savings were depleted, swallowed by previous medical emergencies. Her job barely covered the basics. The bank loans were a distant, cruel joke. She was alone, utterly and terrifyingly alone, with the life of her only family hanging by a thread. The hospital corridors were a blur of sterile white and hushed whispers. Doctors, nurses, all spoke in a language of medical jargon and grim prognoses. Maya, hooked up to a tangle of tubes and wires, looked impossibly small, her chest still struggling for air. Aiyah sat by her bedside, her hand clasped around Maya's tiny, feverish one, a silent prayer forming on her lips. She would find the money. She would move heaven and earth. She would do anything. That desperation, that fierce protective instinct, was the genesis of Aiyah's journey into the city's underbelly. The legal avenues were closed to her. No bank would lend her that kind of money without collateral she didn't possess. So she turned to the shadows, the places where promises were made in hushed tones and debts were paid in blood. She found herself at the door of a man named Silas Thorne, a loan shark whose smile was as sharp as his interest rates. He was a predator, but Aiyah, in her desperation, saw only a lifeline. Silas Thorne, a man whose tailored suits never quite disguised the cruelty in his eyes, had offered her the money. But his terms were brutal. Not just the exorbitant interest, but a commitment, a service. Aiyah, in her fear and love for Maya, hadn't fully understood the implications. She had signed the papers, her hand trembling, the ink a dark stain on her soul. She had agreed to work for him, to be his eyes and ears, to deliver packages, to be a pawn in his dangerous game. She had traded her innocence for Maya's breath. For 6 months, Aiyah had lived a double life. By day, she was the quiet, hard-working waitress, her smile a fragile shield against the world. By night, she moved through the city's dark alleys, a silent shadow, delivering envelopes, picking up packages, her heart a drum against her ribs. She saw things, heard things that would forever haunt her. The casual brutality, the cold indifference to human life, the constant threat of violence that simmered beneath the city's surface. She learned to read faces, to anticipate danger, to become invisible. She learned to speak in the clipped, direct language of the streets, to project an aura of calm, even when her insides were churning with fear. Maya, miraculously, had recovered. The new medication had worked its magic, slowly but surely. Her laughter returned, a balm to Aiyah's wounded soul. But the debt to Silas Thorne, both financial and moral, remained. It was a chain around Aiyah's ankle, a constant reminder of the choices she had made, the darkness she had embraced. She hated it, hated him, but she also knew she would do it again, 1,000 times over, for Maya. It was during this period, this crucible of fear and survival, that Aiyah had stumbled upon her unexpected talent for languages. One night, delivering a package to a dimly lit warehouse, she overheard a conversation. Men, their faces shadowed, their voices low, speaking a language she recognized from a documentary she'd watched once with Maya. Russian. It was the language of Alessio Volkov. Something had stirred within her then, a flicker of curiosity amidst the fear. Driven by an insatiable need to understand the world she was now forced to inhabit, she started listening. She bought a tattered Russian-English dictionary from a second-hand store. She watched foreign films online, subtitles off, straining to decipher the sounds. She practiced phrases, mimicking the cadences, the inflections. It was a secret world she built for herself, a tiny sanctuary of knowledge in the midst of chaos. It was a way to feel in control, to arm herself against the unknown. She didn't know then that this seemingly insignificant hobby would one day become her shield, her weapon, her unexpected trump card against a man like Alessio Volkov. And so, when Alessio Volkov had spoken to her in Russian, his words dripping with a condescending amusement, Aiyah had not just understood him, she had understood his intent. She had seen the challenge in his eyes, the subtle cruelty in his smirk, and she had, without hesitation, met it head-on. She had not only understood the words, but the subtext, the power play. And she had, with a quiet grace, flipped the script. Now, in the charged silence of the Crimson Spoon, Alessio Volkov stared at her, his expression unreadable. The air thrummed with unspoken questions. Who was this woman? How did she speak his language, the language of his private world, of his secrets? "You speak Russian," he stated, not a question but a declaration, his voice devoid of its earlier amusement, now laced with a dangerous edge. "I do," Aiyah replied, her gaze steady, refusing to break. "And I believe you asked for a menu, then proceeded to order a double espresso black and a slice of our New York cheesecake, if I'm not mistaken." Her words were a direct translation, a perfect mirror of his earlier condescending order, delivered with an unwavering confidence that belied her humble surroundings. A muscle in Alessio's jaw twitched. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his eyes never leaving hers. "Indeed, and you understood all of that, did you?" "I am a waitress, Mr. Volkov," Aiyah said, her voice dry, a hint of steel beneath the politeness. "Understanding orders is part of the job description, even when they are delivered with flair." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the few patrons brave enough to listen. Alessio's lips, previously set in a hard line, curved into a genuine smile this time, a slow, dangerous unfurling that transformed his face, making him less a storm and more a predator who had found an interesting prey. "Flair," he repeated, the word rolling off his tongue, tasting it. "I suppose it was. Bring me my order, please, and then, perhaps, we can discuss this flair further." Aiyah nodded, a small, almost imperceptible dip of her head. She turned, walking away from the table, her back straight, her composure unwavering. But as she moved towards the kitchen, a cold dread snaked its way into her stomach. She had won this small battle, but at what cost? She had caught the eye of a lion, and in her world that rarely ended well. She had wanted to survive, to protect Maya. Now she had a feeling her survival was about to become infinitely more complicated. The city had held its breath. Now it was exhaling, and Aiyah was caught in the whirlwind. The kitchen was a sanctuary of controlled chaos. The sizzle of the grill, the clatter of pans, the shouted orders, all familiar, comforting sounds. Aiyah relayed Alessio's order to the cook, her voice betraying none of the turmoil within her. She moved mechanically, pouring coffee, slicing cheesecake, her mind racing. What did he want? Why the test? And how did he even know who she was, or at least enough to try and embarrass her? The questions swirled, a maelstrom of fear and curiosity. She returned to Alessio's table, placing the steaming mug and the generous slice of cheesecake before him with practiced efficiency. His bodyguards, still at the door, watched her every move. She felt their eyes, cold and assessing, like the gaze of vultures. Alessio picked up the spoon, stirring his coffee slowly, his gaze fixed on her. "Sit," he commanded, a simple word, but with the weight of an ultimatum. He gestured to the opposite side of the booth. Aiyah hesitated. This was not part of the job. But she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that refusing him was not an option. Not with men like him, not in this city. She slid into the booth, her back ramrod straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The booth's worn vinyl was cold against her skin. "Tell me, Aiyah Johnson," he began, his voice low, almost conversational, "where did a waitress from the Crimson Spoon learn to speak Russian like a native?" The question was deceptively simple, but Aiyah heard the underlying threat, the demand for answers. He knew her name. That detail, more than anything, sent a shiver down her spine. He had done his homework. "I picked it up," she said, choosing her words carefully, a familiar tightness in her chest. "Out of curiosity. I find languages fascinating." It was a half-truth, but the full truth, that she had learned it to navigate the treacherous waters of the underworld he inhabited, was a secret she would take to her grave. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Curiosity. A dangerous trait, Aiyah, especially when it leads you into places you don't belong." He took a sip of his espresso, his eyes never leaving hers. "Do you know who I am?" "I know enough," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. She knew he was a man who wielded power like a weapon, a man whose name was synonymous with fear and respect. She knew he was a man who could, with a single word, erase her from existence. "And yet, you defied me," he said, a hint of admiration in his tone. "That takes courage, or perhaps foolishness. Which is it, Aiyah?" "Survival," she stated, meeting his gaze head-on. "I protect what's mine." The words hung in the air, a silent challenge. She wasn't just a waitress, she was a survivor, she was a protector. His eyes lingered on her, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. He seemed to be weighing her, assessing her, peeling back the layers of her composure. "Survival," he repeated, almost to himself. "A powerful motivator." He paused, taking another slow sip of coffee. "I have heard of you, Aiyah Johnson, not just your linguistic talents. I hear you are resourceful, unflappable, and fiercely loyal." Aiyah's heart pounded. He knew about her. He knew about her work for Silas Thorne. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't here by chance. He was here for her. "Silas Thorne," he murmured, as if reading her thoughts. "A small-time operator, a rat in the gutter. He owes me a substantial sum." His voice dropped, becoming colder, harder. "And he has offered you as collateral." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Collateral. She was property, a bargaining chip in a game she hadn't known she was playing. Her blood ran cold. The past, the debt, the choices she had made, they had all converged, trapping her in a web far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Silas Thorne, that snake, he had sold her. "I owe him a debt," Aiyah said, her voice tight with suppressed fury. Not you. His debt becomes your debt, Aiyah, Alessio said, his voice devoid of emotion. That is how these things work. He cannot pay, so you will. How? She demanded, her composure finally cracking. I'm a waitress. I have nothing. You have your skills, Alessio replied, a glint in his eye. Your intelligence, your courage, and your linguistic flair. Silas Thorne was a fool to waste you. I, however, see your potential. He leaned back, a faint smile playing on his lips, a chilling echo of his earlier smirk. You will work for me, Aiyah Johnson. Your debt to Thorne will be transferred to me, and in return, you will be under my protection. You will be paid, and your sister, Maya, will want for nothing. The mention of Maya's name, so casually dropped into the conversation, was a calculated blow. It was a reminder of her vulnerability, her greatest fear. Alessio Volkov wasn't just offering her a job, he was offering her a gilded cage, a new kind of servitude. But he was also offering protection, a shield against the endless threats that circled her life. And for Maya, she would walk into any cage. Aiyah looked at him, at the cold, calculating intelligence in his eyes, at the undeniable power that emanated from him. She was trapped. But she was also, for the first time in a long time, seeing a path, however narrow and treacherous, towards a different kind of survival. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice steady now, the fear replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She would play his game, but she would play it on her own terms, to the best of her ability. She would survive, and she would protect Maya. Alessio Volkov's smile widened, a true smile this time, though no less dangerous. Excellent, he said. We begin tonight. He pushed a small, discreet envelope across the table. Inside, you will find instructions, a new phone, and an address. Be there at 10 p.m. sharp. He stood, his movements fluid, powerful, his bodyguards stirred, ready to move. Welcome to the family, Aiyah Johnson. May you prove as valuable as you are intriguing. He left as abruptly as he had arrived, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the echoes of a life irrevocably changed. Aiyah sat there, the envelope a heavy weight on the table, her mind reeling. The city outside continued its restless murmur, but for Aiyah, the world had just cracked open, revealing a precipice she never knew existed. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a part of Alessio Volkov's world, a world of shadows, secrets, and untold dangers. And she knew, with a chilling certainty, that her journey had only just begun. The quiet strength she had displayed in the face of his challenge was about to be tested in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The first few weeks under Alessio Volkov's protection were a blur of new experiences, stark contrasts, and a constant low thrum of anxiety. Aiyah found herself thrust into a world of opulent homes, hushed conversations in multiple languages, and a rigid hierarchy she was only just beginning to comprehend. Her days at the Crimson Spoon became a distant memory, replaced by a new routine that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Her primary role, initially, was as a translator. Alessio, it turned out, conducted business with a vast network of international contacts, and while he spoke several languages, he often preferred to have a neutral party present, someone who could translate nuances, unspoken agreements, and subtle threats. Aiyah's command of Russian, surprisingly, was just the tip of the iceberg. She discovered a latent talent for picking up new languages, a quick ear for accents, and a mind that absorbed grammar and vocabulary with astonishing speed. Within weeks, she was dabbling in Italian, then a smattering of German, her brain a sponge, soaking up every word. She worked from a lavish, almost painfully quiet office in Alessio's sprawling estate, a mansion nestled on a hill overlooking the city. It was a place of dark wood, rich leather, and an unsettling silence that made the smallest sound echo. Her new phone, a sleek, encrypted device, was her lifeline, connecting her to a world she never knew existed. She translated complex documents, sat in on tense video calls, and occasionally accompanied Alessio to clandestine meetings in dimly lit private rooms of exclusive restaurants. She saw the raw power he wielded, the fear he inspired, the absolute loyalty he commanded from his men. They were a motley crew. Hulking, silent bodyguards, sharp-suited advisors, and a network of shadowy figures whose faces she rarely saw. Among them was Victor, Alessio's right-hand man, a man whose scarred face and perpetually grim expression spoke of a violent past. He regarded Aiyah with a suspicious glare, a protective gatekeeper wary of any newcomer, especially one who had so quickly gained Alessio's attention. "You are an anomaly, Aiyah Johnson," Victor had grunted one evening, his voice a low growl, as she translated a particularly sensitive document. "The boss does not usually keep strays." Aiyah had met his gaze, unflinching. "I am not a stray, Victor. I am an asset." He had merely scoffed, but a flicker of something, perhaps grudging respect, had softened the hardness in his eyes for a fleeting moment. Despite the luxury of her surroundings, Aiyah never forgot her roots. The immense wealth surrounding her served only to highlight the stark disparity of her own past. She still lived in her small, cramped apartment, refusing Alessio's offer of a room in the mansion. She visited Maya every day, ensuring her sister had everything she needed, enrolling her in a private school she could only have dreamed of before. Maya, shielded from the true nature of Aiyah's new employment, thrived, her laughter once again bright and unburdened. Aiyah ensured Maya's medical care was top-notch, the best doctors, the latest treatments, all paid for by Alessio's bottomless coffers. It was a constant reminder of the Faustian bargain she had struck, but seeing Maya's healthy glow made every sacrifice, every fear, worth it. Alessio himself remained an enigma. He was demanding, ruthless, and utterly focused on his business. He rarely smiled, and his storm-grey eyes often held a distant, haunted quality. Yet, Aiyah noticed small things. The way he sometimes lingered on a painting in the hallway, a fleeting softness in his gaze. The rare moments he would offer a dry, witty comment, a glimpse of a sharp intellect beneath the hardened exterior. He was a man of contradictions, a fortress of ice with hints of hidden warmth. Their interactions were strictly professional, yet charged with an unspoken awareness. He would test her, pushing her linguistic abilities, asking her to translate complex idioms or obscure regional dialects. She always met the challenge, her quiet competence slowly chipping away at his initial assessment of her as merely a curiosity. He would often watch her, his gaze intense, assessing, and Aiyah, despite herself, found herself drawn to the silent power he exuded, the dangerous charisma that seemed to cling to him like a second skin. One evening, a little over a month into her new role, Aiyah was preparing to leave the mansion when Alessio called her into his private study. The room was dark, lit only by a single lamp, casting long, dramatic shadows. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, the city lights twinkling in the distance behind him. "Aiyah," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I have a new assignment for you. More personal." Aiyah's stomach tightened. "Sir?" He gestured to a large, framed photograph on his desk. It was a picture of a woman, exquisitely beautiful, with kind, intelligent eyes, and a young boy, no older than 5, nestled in her arms, his face alight with a joyous smile. The boy had Alessio's storm-grey eyes. "My wife, Isabella," Alessio said, his voice a low, rough murmur, "and my son, Leo." A profound sadness etched itself onto his features, a vulnerability Aiyah had never seen before. "They were taken from me 5 years ago. A car accident, or so the police said." His gaze sharpened, turning cold and hard. "I know it was no accident. It was an attack, a message from my enemies." Aiyah felt a pang of sympathy, a deep understanding of his pain. She knew loss. She knew the hollow ache of grief, the burning desire for justice. "I have been searching for answers ever since," he continued, his voice laced with a raw intensity. "For the truth, and for the man responsible. I believe I have finally found him. A former associate, a man I trusted, named Nikolai Volkov, my own cousin. He orchestrated it, to seize control of my organization." Aiyah listened, her heart aching for the man before her, the powerful, ruthless Alessio Volkov, reduced to a grieving husband and father. It was a side of him she never imagined. "Nikolai has a daughter," Alessio said, his voice grim, "named Anya. She is unwell, suffering from a rare, debilitating illness. He keeps her hidden away in a remote clinic in the mountains, a place he believes is impenetrable." He looked at Aiyah, his eyes burning with a fierce, cold resolve. "I want you to go there, Aiyah, undercover. Get close to the girl. Learn everything you can about Nikolai through her. Find any evidence, any lead that can connect him to my family's murder. And if possible, if the opportunity arises, bring her back. She is my leverage, my only leverage against him." Aiyah stared at him, stunned. This was beyond translation, beyond simple paperwork. This was espionage. This was dangerous. "Bring her back," she repeated, a tremor in her voice. "Sir, I'm a waitress. I'm not a spy. I'm not a kidnapper." "You are resourceful, Aiyah," Alessio said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "You have a keen mind, you are observant, and you have a way with people. You will find a way. Anya is a child, a sick child. You have a sister. You understand the fierce protectiveness of family. Use that." His gaze was unyielding. "This is not a request, Aiyah. This is your debt, paid in full, or not at all." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Her debt, her sister. Aiyah closed her eyes for a brief moment, picturing Maya's laughing face. She had no choice. She was trapped. But a strange, unexpected thought also surfaced. A child. A sick child. She understood. "I will do it," Aiyah said, her voice steady, her resolve hardening. "But I have conditions." Alessio raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Conditions?" "If I bring her back," Aiyah began, "she is to be treated with dignity. She is a child, not a pawn. Her medical needs are paramount, and no harm is to come to her, ever. Alessio studied her, a long, assessing look, then a slow nod. Agreed. She will be cared for, protected. Her medical needs will be met. I give you my word, and I do not break my word, Aiyah. And if I fail? Aiyah asked, her voice barely a whisper. You will not fail, Alessio said, his voice cold, absolute, because failure is not an option for either of us. He pushed a folder across the desk. All the information you need is inside. Your new identity, your cover story, your travel arrangements. You leave in 48 hours. Aiyah picked up the folder, its weight feeling immense in her hands. She was no longer just a translator, a pawn. She was now an operative, a player in a deadly game, with the fate of a sick child, and perhaps her own, hanging in the balance. The city outside, with its twinkling lights, seemed to mock her, a glittering facade over a world of shadows and deceit. She had entered Alessio Volkov's world to protect her sister. Now she was entering an even darker corner of it, to protect a stranger's child, a child who was both a victim and a weapon. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, but Aiyah knew, deep in her bones, that she would find a way to survive, to protect, to find the truth, no matter the cost. The mountain air was thin and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Aiyah, under her new identity as Elena Petrova, a medical assistant specializing in rare pediatric conditions, felt the cold seep into her bones, a stark contrast to the humid city air she was used to. The remote clinic, nestled deep in the jagged peaks of the Caucasus, was a fortress disguised as a sanctuary. High walls, surveillance cameras, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Nikolai Volkov, Alessio's treacherous cousin, had indeed chosen his hiding place well. Her cover story was meticulously crafted, her new passport and credentials flawless. Alessio's network was thorough. She had spent the last 48 hours poring over medical texts, memorizing symptoms, treatments, and medical jargon related to Anya's specific illness, a rare autoimmune disorder that attacked the nervous system. She had watched videos of children with similar conditions, trying to understand their struggles, to prepare herself for the emotional toll this mission would undoubtedly take. Anya. The name echoed in her mind. A child caught in the crossfire of a brutal family feud. Aiyah felt a fierce, protective instinct already stirring within her. She was here for leverage, yes, but she was also here for the child. The clinic itself was surprisingly modern, almost sterile. White walls, polished floors, and the hushed whispers of medical staff. Aiyah was introduced to Dr. Petrov, a stern, elderly man who oversaw Anya's care. He seemed wary, his eyes sharp and scrutinizing, but Aiyah's calm demeanor and seemingly extensive knowledge of Anya's condition quickly disarmed him. She had learned well from her time in the shadows, how to project confidence, how to blend in. Anya's room was on the top floor, a spacious, sunlit chamber with large windows overlooking the snow-capped mountains. The girl, no older than 7, lay in a specialized bed, her small body frail, almost translucent. Her hair, the color of spun gold, fanned out on the pillow. Her eyes, a startling shade of blue, were wide and distant, clouded with pain and a profound weariness. She was non-verbal, her illness having robbed her of the ability to speak, but her gaze held an intelligence that tugged at Aiyah's heart. Aiyah spent her days observing, assisting the nurses, and slowly, cautiously, building a rapport with Anya. She read to her, in a soft, soothing voice, telling stories of brave princesses and magical lands. She sang lullabies, her rich, melodic voice filling the quiet room. She held Anya's tiny hand, offering comfort, a silent promise of protection. Anya, initially withdrawn, slowly began to respond. A flicker of recognition in her eyes, a faint squeeze of Aiyah's hand, a soft, almost imperceptible smile. Aiyah also began her true mission, searching. She meticulously reviewed Anya's medical charts, looking for anything out of place, any hidden messages, any clue that could connect Nikolai to Alessio's family's murder. She listened to the hushed conversations of the staff, learning about Nikolai's infrequent visits, his almost obsessive control over Anya's care, and his deep-seated paranoia. He was a man consumed by fear and ambition. One evening, after the nurses had left for the night, Aiyah found herself alone with Anya. The setting sun cast long purple shadows across the room. Anya's breathing was shallow, her small chest struggling. Aiyah felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of love for this fragile child, a love that transcended the mission, the danger, the debt. She was a child, innocent and vulnerable, caught in a war she didn't understand. "It's okay, little one," Aiyah whispered, stroking Anya's hair. "I'm here. You're not alone." Anya's blue eyes, surprisingly lucid, fixed on Aiyah's face. A silent tear traced a path down her pale cheek. Then, with immense effort, Anya's tiny finger pointed towards a small, ornate music box on her bedside table. Aiyah picked it up. It was intricately carved, depicting a whimsical scene of dancing fairies. She wound the key, and a delicate melody, hauntingly beautiful, filled the room. As the music played, Anya's eyes closed, and a peaceful expression settled on her face. Aiyah watched her, a sudden, inexplicable premonition washing over her. The music box. It felt important. It felt connected. Later that night, long after Anya had fallen asleep, Aiyah carefully examined the music box. It was heavier than it looked, and the intricate carving seemed to hide something. With nimble fingers, she began to explore its mechanisms, the techniques she had learned from years of fixing small, broken things for Maya coming to her aid. After several tense minutes, a tiny latch clicked, and a hidden compartment, almost invisible, sprang open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small, tarnished silver locket. Aiyah's heart pounded. She opened it. On one side, a miniature photograph of a younger Nikolai, smiling, his arm around a woman Aiyah didn't recognize. On the other side, a tiny, almost imperceptible inscription etched in a foreign script. It wasn't Russian. It was old, intricate, almost like a code. Aiyah felt a thrill of discovery, a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the lead she had been sent to find. The inscription. It had to mean something. She carefully closed the locket and the hidden compartment, placing the music box back on the table exactly as she had found it. Her mind raced, trying to decipher the strange script. It wasn't a language she knew, not yet, but she would learn it. She would find someone who knew it. This locket, this tiny, unassuming object, held the key to Alessio's past, to Anya's future, and to her own fragile survival. The quiet clinic, with its sterile white walls, suddenly felt charged with a dangerous energy, a silent testament to the secrets it held. Aiyah knew with chilling certainty that her mission had just escalated. The next few days were a blur of intense research and quiet observation. Aiyah, using the clinic's limited internet access and her encrypted phone, began to meticulously research ancient scripts, focusing on obscure European dialects. The inscription on the locket, she discovered, was a rare form of Old Slavic, a language almost entirely lost to time, known only to a handful of scholars and, perhaps, the oldest, most secretive families. The discovery sent a shiver down her spine. This wasn't just a family feud, it was a legacy, steeped in history and hidden truths. She also intensified her bond with Anya. The girl, sensing Aiyah's genuine warmth, had begun to open up in her own silent way. She would track Aiyah with her eyes, a faint smile gracing her lips when Aiyah read to her, a small, almost imperceptible nod when Aiyah spoke of distant lands and brave heroes. One afternoon, Aiyah was sketching a picture of a soaring eagle for Anya, when the girl, with immense effort, raised a trembling hand and pointed to a small, faded scar on Aiyah's wrist, a remnant from a childhood accident. Aiyah looked at the scar, then at Anya's blue eyes, filled with a silent question, a shared understanding of pain. It was a moment of profound connection, a silent acknowledgement of their shared vulnerability. It was during one of Nikolai's infrequent visits that Aiyah first saw the true depth of his paranoia. He was a man of sharp angles and colder eyes than Alessio, his smile a thin, predatory line. He spoke to Anya in clipped, dismissive tones, barely making eye contact, his attention focused solely on the clinic's security and the intricacies of her medical reports. He distrusted everyone, his gaze constantly sweeping the room, searching for hidden threats. He even wore a similar locket, a mirror image of Anya's, tucked beneath his shirt, a detail Aiyah noted with a sudden jolt of recognition. The inscription, she now knew, was a family crest, a mark of their ancient lineage. Aiyah, maintaining her facade of the dedicated medical assistant, observed him closely. She learned that Nikolai's visits were always short, always tense, and always followed by a surge of security checks. He never stayed long enough to truly connect with his daughter, his fear outweighing any paternal affection. It cemented Aiyah's resolve. This man was truly a monster, using his own child as a shield, a pawn in his ruthless game for power. Her breakthrough came on a cold, blustery night. A fierce blizzard had descended upon the mountains, cutting off the clinic from the outside world. The power flickered, then died, plunging the facility into an unsettling darkness, lit only by emergency generators. In the chaos, Aiyah saw her opportunity. Nikolai, alerted by the storm, had arrived earlier than expected, his paranoia heightened by the isolation. She found him in his private study, a room rarely accessed by staff, illuminated by the flickering glow of a single hurricane lamp. He was hunched over a desk, a map spread before him, his face etched with worry. As he rose to pace, Aiyah noticed a small, leather-bound journal lying open on his desk, its pages filled with the same ancient Slavic script as the locket. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She waited for her moment. As Nikolai stepped out for a moment, summoned by a guard, Aiyah slipped into the study. Her hands trembled as she quickly photographed the open pages of the journal with her encrypted phone, focusing on the script, the family crest, and any dates or names she could discern. She worked with lightning speed, her senses heightened by the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Just as she finished, she heard footsteps approaching. She barely had time to slide the phone back into her pocket and compose herself before Nikolai re-entered, His eyes narrowed, scrutinizing the room. "Everything in order, Elena?" he asked, his voice sharp, suspicion lacing his words. "Yes, sir," Aiyah replied, her voice calm, her gaze steady. "Just checking on the power fluctuations. Anya is sensitive to changes in the environment." He grunted, seemingly satisfied, but his eyes lingered on her for a moment too long. Aiyah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard outside. She had been too close. That night, Aiyah knew she had to act. The information she had gathered was too dangerous to hold on to for long. She had to send it to Alessio. But the blizzard had knocked out all communications. She was stranded, isolated, with a ticking clock counting down to her discovery. She made a decision. She would take Anya. The thought, once unthinkable, now felt like the only path forward. Anya was not safe here, not with a father who saw her as a tool. Aiyah had seen the way Nikolai looked at the locket, at the ancient script, a mix of reverence and obsession. She suspected the locket and the journal held not just family history, but secrets, perhaps even the location of hidden assets or information crucial to Alessio's case. Anya, as the carrier of that lineage, was intertwined with it all, and Aiyah, seeing the child's fragile state, knew she couldn't leave her behind. The escape plan formed quickly in her mind, a desperate gamble. The blizzard, while a hindrance, was also her greatest ally. It would create a diversion, mask her movements, and delay any pursuit. She had studied the clinic's blueprints, learned the shift changes of the guards, observed the blind spots in the surveillance. At 2 a.m., the darkest hour, Aiyah moved. She dressed Anya in layers of warm clothing, her small body trembling but surprisingly compliant. Aiyah whispered words of comfort, promises of safety, her heart aching with the weight of her decision. She administered a mild sedative to Anya, just enough to keep her calm and asleep during the arduous journey. She packed a small bag with Anya's essential medications, warm blankets, and the music box, the locket carefully tucked into her own pocket. She slipped out of Anya's room, a silent shadow in the darkened corridor. The emergency lights cast eerie, flickering shadows. She avoided the main exits, opting instead for a rarely used service tunnel that led to the clinic's underground garage. The cold was biting, the wind howling like a hungry wolf. The garage was dimly lit, filled with several vehicles, including a sturdy, all-terrain SUV. Aiyah, remembering a brief conversation she'd overheard about the guards' vehicle preferences, knew which one had the best chance of navigating the treacherous mountain roads. She had learned to drive on dusty country roads, her father teaching her the mechanics of an old pickup truck. She was no stranger to challenging terrain. As she carefully loaded Anya into the back seat, wrapping her in blankets, a sudden noise echoed from the tunnel entrance. Footsteps. Voices. They had been discovered. Her heart leaped into her throat. "Elena, stop right there!" a voice boomed, followed by the metallic click of a weapon. Aiyah froze, Anya's small, pale face a silent plea in the dim light. It was Dr. Petrov, accompanied by 2 armed guards, their faces grim, their weapons aimed directly at her. His eyes, usually sharp, were now filled with a mix of betrayal and cold fury. "You are a spy, aren't you, Doctor?" Petrov snarled, his voice trembling with rage. "You used this child. You used us." "I am trying to save her," Aiyah replied, her voice firm, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "Nikolai Volkov is a monster. He orchestrated the murder of Alessio Volkov's family, his own kin. He keeps Anya here not out of love, but out of fear, out of greed. Lies, Dr. Petrov roared. Nikolai is her father. He protects her. He uses her, Aiyah countered, her voice rising, desperation lacing her words. He keeps her isolated, a prisoner, for his own twisted games. He doesn't care about her well-being, only her value as leverage. One of the guards, a burly man with a cruel sneer, stepped forward, raising his rifle. Enough talk. Drop the child and come quietly. Aiyah knew this was it. She had one chance. Her eyes darted around the garage, searching for an escape, a weapon, anything. Her gaze landed on a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall, then on a stack of empty crates. "Listen to me," Aiyah pleaded, her voice calmer now, a desperate gamble. "Nikolai Volkov will not protect you. He will sacrifice you all if it serves his purpose. I have evidence, proof, in this phone, proof that will expose him. If you stop me, you become complicit in his crimes. And Alessio Volkov, he is not a man to be trifled with. He will come for you all." Her words, spoken with conviction, seemed to give the guards pause. They exchanged nervous glances. Alessio Volkov's name carried weight even in this remote stronghold. Dr. Petrov, however, remained resolute. "She is lying. She is an enemy. Seize her." As the guards moved forward, Aiyah acted. With a burst of unexpected speed, she grabbed the fire extinguisher, aiming it directly at the lead guard's face. A cloud of white, choking foam erupted, blinding him. In the ensuing chaos, Aiyah kicked out, knocking over the stack of crates, creating a temporary barrier. She scrambled into the SUV, fumbling with the keys, her hands shaking. The engine roared to life. Tires squealed on the concrete floor as Aiyah slammed the vehicle into reverse, narrowly missing Dr. Petrov, who leaped out of the way with a cry of alarm. Shots rang out, bullets pinging off the reinforced body of the SUV. Aiyah floored the accelerator, crashing through the garage door, sending splinters of wood flying into the blizzard. The SUV plunged into the whiteout, the headlights struggling to pierce the swirling snow. Aiyah gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Anya, surprisingly, remained asleep, a testament to the sedative and her own fragile resilience. The mountain road was a treacherous ribbon of ice and snow, winding precariously along sheer cliffs. The blizzard raged, reducing visibility to mere feet. Aiyah drove by instinct, relying on her memory of the winding path and a desperate prayer. She knew they would be pursued. She had to put as much distance as possible between them and the clinic. Hours blurred into an eternity. The cold seeped into the SUV, despite the heater blasting. Aiyah fought exhaustion, her eyes burning, her muscles aching. She checked on Anya constantly, ensuring she was warm, her breathing steady. The little girl, despite the terrifying ordeal, remained peacefully asleep, a small, innocent bundle of hope in the heart of the storm. Just as dawn began to paint the sky with streaks of pale grey, a distant rumble reached Aiyah's ears. Headlights, piercing through the diminishing blizzard, appeared in her rearview mirror. They had caught up. Nikolai's men. "Damn it," Aiyah muttered, pressing harder on the accelerator. The SUV skidded on a patch of ice, sending her heart into her throat. She wrestled with the wheel, regaining control, her eyes scanning the treacherous road ahead. The pursuing vehicle, a heavy-duty armoured truck, gained on them rapidly. It was clear Nikolai was not going to let his leverage or his secrets escape. Aiyah knew she couldn't outrun them on these roads. She had to find another way. Ahead, the road curved sharply around a towering rock face, a sheer drop on one side. Aiyah remembered seeing a narrow, almost invisible track, a perilous shortcut known only to local shepherds, a path that led down to a forgotten valley. It was a risky maneuver, a path of no return, but it was their only chance. With a surge of desperate courage, Aiyah veered sharply off the main road, sending the SUV bouncing violently over rocks and snowdrifts. The armoured truck, caught by surprise, overshot the turn, its driver cursing loudly. Aiyah glanced in her rearview mirror. They were slowing, regrouping, but they would follow. The shortcut was even more treacherous than she remembered. The SUV lurched and groaned, struggling to maintain traction on the steep, icy incline. Trees whipped past, their branches clawing at the vehicle. Anya stirred, a soft whimper escaping her lips. "Almost there, little one," Aiyah whispered, her voice raw with exhaustion and fear. "Almost there." Suddenly, a deafening crack echoed through the mountains. A massive tree, weakened by the blizzard, splintered and fell, crashing across the narrow track, blocking their path. Aiyah slammed on the brakes, the SUV skidding to a halt, mere feet from the impassable barrier. They were trapped. The rumble of the approaching armoured truck grew louder, closer. Aiyah looked at Anya's pale face, then at the fallen tree, then at the sheer drop into the valley below. There was no escape, not by vehicle. She grabbed her phone, the encrypted device and the locket. She knew what she had to do. She had to send the information to Alessio. She had to ensure Nikolai's secrets and his crimes would not remain buried. With trembling fingers, she typed a frantic message to Alessio, attaching the photographs of Nikolai's journal, a brief explanation of the locket and the ancient script, and a single, desperate plea. "Anya, Valley, need help." She prayed the signal would somehow pierce through the mountain's isolation. She knew it was a long shot. Then she looked at Anya. The child was awake now, her blue eyes wide with fear, reflecting Aiyah's own desperation. Aiyah gently unbuckled Anya from her car seat. "We have to go, sweetie," Aiyah said, her voice soft but firm. "We have to walk." Anya surprisingly nodded, her small hand reaching for Aiyah's. It was a testament to the trust Aiyah had painstakingly built. Aiyah grabbed the small bag with Anya's medication and wrapped the child in a thick blanket, securing her to her back, ensuring she was as warm and safe as possible. She looked at the approaching headlights, now visible through the trees. They were almost upon them. "Stay close to me," Aiyah commanded, her voice fierce, protective. "No matter what, hold on." She scrambled out of the SUV, pulling Anya with her, and began to climb over the fallen tree, her movements hampered by the child on her back, the treacherous snow, and the sheer exhaustion. The armoured truck screeched to a halt behind the SUV, its doors flying open. Nikolai's men, their faces grim, spilled out, weapons raised. "Stop! Elena!" Nikolai's voice, sharp and furious, cut through the wind. "You cannot escape! Give me back my daughter!" Aiyah ignored him, her gaze fixed on the dense forest beyond the fallen tree. It was their only chance. They would have to go on foot, through the blizzard, down into the valley, hoping against hope that Alessio had received her message, that help would come. She plunged into the forest, the snow deep, the trees thick, a desperate race against time, against the elements, against the relentless pursuit of Nikolai Volkov and his men. The cold bit at her exposed skin, the wind howled, and every step was an agonizing effort. But with Anya clinging to her back, a fragile beacon of innocence, Aiyah found a strength she didn't know she possessed. She would not let this child fall. She would not fail. The hours that followed were a blur of primal survival. Aiyah stumbled through the snow-laden forest, her legs burning, her lungs aching for air. Anya, surprisingly, remained quiet, nestled against Aiyah's back, her small body a warm weight that fueled Aiyah's desperate resolve. The sedative had worn off, but the child, perhaps sensing the gravity of their situation, remained silent, clinging to Aiyah with surprising strength. The blizzard began to subside, the wind dying down, replaced by a biting cold that promised to freeze them solid. The snow, however, was still deep, making every step a monumental effort. Aiyah knew they couldn't last much longer. Hypothermia was a silent, insidious killer. Just as despair threatened to consume her, a faint, rhythmic thumping reached her ears. A helicopter. Her heart leaped. Was it Alessio? Or Nikolai? She had to take the chance. She pulled Anya from her back, holding her close, and scanned the sky, her eyes burning with a desperate hope. The thumping grew louder, closer. A powerful spotlight cut through the pre-dawn gloom, sweeping across the snow-covered landscape. A dark shape, a military-grade transport helicopter, materialized above the tree line, its powerful rotors kicking up a flurry of snow. It was Alessio's. Relief, so profound it brought tears to her eyes, washed over Aiyah. A rope ladder descended, swaying in the wind. A figure in tactical gear, a familiar, hulking silhouette, began to rappel down. Victor. His grim face, usually a source of unease, now seemed like a beacon of salvation. "Aiyah! Anya!" Victor's voice, amplified by a bullhorn, cut through the roar of the helicopter. "Over here!" Aiyah, with newfound strength, began to drag Anya through the deep snow towards the clearing where Victor was descending. But just as they reached the edge of the tree line, a volley of gunshots erupted from the forest behind them. Nikolai's men. "Damn it!" Victor roared, drawing his own weapon, returning fire. "Get them up, now!" Aiyah pushed Anya towards Victor, urging her to climb the ladder. "Go, sweetie, go!" Anya, her small face etched with fear, looked at Aiyah, then at the ladder, then back at the approaching gunfire. She hesitated. "Aiyah!" Victor yelled, his voice strained. "She's not moving!" Aiyah knew. Anya was traumatized, scared. She couldn't make the climb alone. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, Aiyah shoved Anya onto the ladder, then began to climb after her, pushing the child upwards, step by agonizing step, shielding her body with her own. Bullets whizzed past, narrowly missing them. The cold metal of the ladder bit into her hands, but Aiyah ignored the pain, her gaze fixed on Anya, on their escape. Suddenly, a sharp, searing pain exploded in Aiyah's shoulder. A bullet. She cried out, her grip faltering, but she held on, her resolve unyielding. Anya, sensing her pain, cried out too, her small hands clutching Aiyah's shirt. "Hold on, Aiyah!" Victor yelled, reaching down, grabbing Anya, pulling her upwards. "Just a little further." With a final, desperate burst of strength, Aiyah pushed Anya into Victor's waiting arms, then collapsed onto the ladder, her vision blurring, the pain in her shoulder radiating through her entire body. Victor, with a grunt, hoisted her up, pulling her into the helicopter. Inside, Alessio Volkov was waiting. His storm-grey eyes, usually cold and unreadable, were now filled with a mix of relief and something else, something akin to fear, as he saw Aiyah's bloodied shoulder. He took Anya from Victor, holding the trembling child close, murmuring words of comfort in Russian. Anya, surprisingly, leaned into him, her small body finding solace in his embrace. Alessio then turned to Aiyah, his gaze intense. "You are hurt," he said, his voice rough with concern. "I'm fine," Aiyah gasped, the pain making her light-headed. "Anya, is she okay?" "She is safe," Alessio replied, his eyes fixed on her. "You saved her, Aiyah. You saved my niece." He then looked at the encrypted phone clutched in her hand. "Did you get it?" Aiyah nodded, handing him the phone, then the locket. "Nikolai's journal. The locket. Old Slavic. It's a family crest. It's all in there." Alessio took the phone, his gaze hardening as he looked at the images of Nikolai's journal. He then opened the locket, his eyes widening as he saw the inscription. A muscle in his jaw twitched. This is more than I ever imagined. You have given me everything, Aiyah. Everything." He called for the medic, who immediately began to tend to Aiyah's wound. As the medic worked, Alessio sat beside her, holding Anya in one arm, his other hand reaching out, gently squeezing Aiyah's uninjured arm. His touch was warm, reassuring, a silent acknowledgement of her sacrifice, her courage. "You risked everything," Alessio said, his voice low, "for a child you barely knew." Aiyah looked at Anya, nestled safely in Alessio's arms, her small face finally peaceful. "She's not just leverage, Alessio. She's an innocent. She deserves a life free from this darkness." Alessio looked at Anya, then back at Aiyah, a profound understanding passing between them. The cold, ruthless Mafia boss and the fiercely protective Waitress. They had found common ground in the desperate act of saving a child. The helicopter soared through the dawn sky, leaving the treacherous mountains behind. Aiyah, her shoulder bandaged, felt exhaustion finally claim her. But as she drifted into sleep, she knew one thing. She had faced the darkness, and she had emerged, wounded but unbroken, with an innocent life saved, and a powerful, enigmatic man by her side. Her debt was paid, but her journey, she suspected, was far from over. Months later, the city finally seemed to breathe again. The whispers of Alessio Volkov's war with his cousin Nikolai had reached a crescendo, then abruptly ceased. Justice, in the shadowy world they inhabited, had been swift and brutal. Nikolai Volkov, exposed by the evidence Aiyah had provided, had been stripped of his power, his influence, and ultimately his freedom. Alessio, with the ancient family secrets revealed by the old Slavic journal, had consolidated his control, emerging stronger, more formidable than ever. Aiyah's life too had transformed. Her shoulder wound had healed, leaving a faint scar, a badge of honor in her quiet fight for survival. She no longer worked at the Crimson Spoon. Instead, she found herself in a new role, one she never could have imagined. She lived in a beautiful, sun-drenched cottage on the sprawling grounds of Alessio's estate, a place she had once refused, but now accepted as her sanctuary. Maya, fully recovered and thriving, lived with her, attending a prestigious private school, her laughter echoing through their new home. Anya, too, was there. The little girl, no longer a prisoner of her illness or her father's machinations, was slowly but surely healing. Alessio had spared no expense, bringing in the world's leading specialists, ensuring Anya received the best possible care. Her condition, while still challenging, was improving. She was no longer non-verbal. Her first word, a soft, hesitant mama, had been directed at Aiyah, a moment that had brought tears to both Aiyah's and Alessio's eyes.
Aiyah had become Anya's primary caregiver, her protector, her chosen mother. She taught Anya to read, to draw, to laugh again. She helped her navigate the world, patiently guiding her through physical therapy, celebrating every small victory. The bond between them was fierce, unbreakable, forged in the crucible of fear and desperation. Alessio Volkov, the formidable Mafia boss, had also changed. The storm grey in his eyes still held a hint of darkness, a reminder of his past, but it was now tempered by a surprising warmth, a profound tenderness, especially when he looked at Anya or at Aiyah. He would often join them in the evenings, reading to Anya, listening to Aiyah's quiet stories, a silent observer in their newfound domesticity. He was still a man of power, of secrets, but he was also a man who had found a different kind of family, a different kind of purpose. The romance between them, slow and unspoken, bloomed like a fragile flower in the harsh landscape of their lives. It wasn't a whirlwind passion, but a deep, quiet understanding, a mutual respect forged in shared danger and unwavering loyalty. He admired her strength, her integrity, her fierce protectiveness. She saw beyond his hardened exterior, recognizing the deep emotional wounds, the profound loss that had shaped him, and the capacity for love that lay beneath. One evening, as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Aiyah sat on the cottage porch, Anya asleep in her lap, her small hand clutching Aiyah's. Alessio joined her, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, but his gaze was fixed on Anya. "She calls you Mama now," he said, his voice soft, a hint of wonder in his tone. Aiyah smiled, stroking Anya's hair. "She does. You have given her a life, Aiyah," he continued, his gaze shifting to her, intense and vulnerable. "You have given her hope. You have given me hope. You saved my family. You saved my soul." Aiyah met his gaze, her heart swelling with an emotion she hadn't dared to name. "We saved each other, Alessio." He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, his touch warm and reassuring. "I know this is not the life you imagined, Aiyah Johnson, but I want you to know you are safe here. You are loved, both you and Maya and Anya. You are my family now, my chosen family." Aiyah's eyes filled with tears. She had faced the darkness, confronted the most dangerous man in the city to protect her sister. And in doing so, she had found a family, a home, and a love she never knew she deserved. "And you, Alessio Volkov," Aiyah said, her voice trembling with emotion, "are ours." He leaned in, his lips finding hers in a soft, tender kiss, a silent promise of a future built on courage, on sacrifice, and on a love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places. The city, finally, seemed to sleep, its shadows receding, replaced by the gentle glow of a new dawn. This is the story of Aiyah Johnson, the waitress who defied a mafia boss, who found strength in vulnerability, and who proved that even in the darkest corners of the city, love, family, and integrity can triumph over power, greed, and betrayal. Her journey reminds us that true strength is not found in the size of your fortune, but in the courage of your heart, in the fierce protectiveness of your love, and in the unwavering belief that every life, especially an innocent one, is worth fighting for.
And sometimes the most shocking responses come from the quietest souls. So, tell me, what would you have done? Would you have risked everything for a chance at a different life? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you believe in the power of a single individual to change their world, then please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of courage, love, and unexpected heroes. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and never underestimate the quiet power of a determined heart.